Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good night, depending on where you are in the world today. And we're very happy to be continuing this series with Laura Belay, all the way out in the United States of America, on this fine Monday morning, and myself here in Cape Town, South Africa, on a very fine Monday afternoon.
Nice.
How have you been, Laura?
As always, fabulous. A little bit of a horse is trolloping within my throat, so forgive me if I sound a little unclear. But other than a pre-winter small cold, that I am J3 equals Eing it out of my system within a few days. I'm great, and as always, just so honored and excited to be here. I love our time together, and I want to change the world with you. So I'm excited.
Fantastic. Well, for me as well, it's such a great honor to have these chats with you and really explore how this formatting and process can really help impact people's lives. And I was mentioning to you just before we started that when I woke up this morning, I wasn't in like the best frame of mind. And it took me a while to kind of even figure out where that was coming from because the very first thing I went to was, okay, J3 formula, let's do this. Awareness. And I went, okay, I'm aware that I'm in a funk, but that's not enough. What is actually the underlying root of it? And it took me a couple of hours to kind of let that mull around in my thoughts and for it to really come up. And then from there, I was able to move myself to a neutral position with a positive outcome being seen but not experienced. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes.
So I could see what the positive outcome could potentially be, but it hadn't really landed in my system as yet. And this then brings me to the question that I was going to ask you today before we kind of get into our deep dive is I couldn't help but notice that even though I could see the potential positive outcome, I knew the steps that I would have to take to get there. I had the willingness to do that. The interesting thing for me was it still wouldn't quite land, and my emotional, energetic state still remained neutral. It refused to shift to positive. I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So, first of all, just an acknowledgement to the beginning of mastery of this application of the formula. You really are not only reading the book, and so many of us do, right? We read, it's the application of the knowledge that really allows us that transference and that transformation. So, such a poignant example of steady as she goes, which is what we need. We are so conditioned to have this quick fix, this fast turnaround, and we want it. And we're so accustomed to having it on the outside: change our hair, put makeup on, wear some cool clothes, you know, buy artwork, whatever it may be. And we get this quick, instant gratification. And we really don't understand the amount of work, internal work, it really takes to alter and recalibrate decades old patterning. So while we're going through the application and the system and the awareness and the movement of this formula and the education within the book, it isn't going to be immediate. How could it be? We are becoming aware of our own power in real time, and there is no such way to sprinkle some dissolvement on it. It's work, it's self actualized work. We have to make those points of connection. What am I thinking about? Why am I thinking about that? Where is it coming from? Where is it leading? How can I neutralize it? What am I going to apply to neutralize it? And then look at that awareness. Why am I not moving from neutral to positive like that? There's that judgment, there's that expectation. But yet, some part of you either saw it from the idea of what you're creating, even though maybe energetically it didn't settle in. within a day. Yet the pattern of probably what really was in the subconscious, maybe in your dream state, or just the residue of attitude of what you woke up into, that's probably been there for years, if not decades. So I really think the understanding comes from time, application, practice, mastery. Think of, someone, a sage, even a monk. I always go to a monk because it's mastery of time. And they will even tell you, and I think we talked about this, but they don't have the distractions that we do. And it still takes them a lifetime to master this awareness and this awakening and this connectivity. And here we are with the chaos outside of our home, the chaos within our home, and then all of kind of this pattern dysfunction within us. And we're already expecting it to turn immediately. But you went from awakening to a negative state to neutralizing it within hours, where before that attitude probably would have traveled with you throughout the entire day, if not days in.
Oh, for sure, because I recognized it when I started to do the awareness exercises to try and actually figure out what was causing this. And it hit me what it was. And that was when I really went, oh, okay, we need to J3 this immediately, because exactly as you said, my experience is that I would usually carry that negativity, and it wouldn't just stay in a depressive state. It would transform into anger, and it would just become this state throughout the entire day, where the moment anything goes wrong, it's like, well, you see, I should have just stayed in bed. Obviously, it was just not going to be my day from the get-go. And the negativity then just breeds upon itself. And it
And that's
was
the pattern. And that's, remember, so that beauty to that awareness and that application of that first principle, it any other time in the past, it would have just fed the pattern, which would have the outcome would have been the behavior from the belief, right? That feeds that pattern. Now you're starting to recalibrate the thought around the pattern. You're entering in a new information into the database, which is slowly going to push out the antiquated, outdated, unnecessary mind chatter. So very quickly now, as you said, if it was before, I would have gotten up and just rolled with the pattern, rolled with it. And that day would have just, everything that came in would have been another, nick into the pattern. Now you're already disrupting the pattern and you're already replacing it with positive skill.
And this then brings me to the very first thought that I wanted to do a deep dive on today. And it was well, there's so many beautiful thoughts that come out of each chapter, but this was just so beautifully succinct, because it was in chapter 10 where it says, choose the thoughts we want to think about and consider how positive choice consideration is formatted. Now, on the face of it, that particular statement sounds a bit, what's what I'm looking for? It can sound a bit academic.
Yes.
But then when I actually started to think about it, and even as my day progressed today, looking at my attitude towards things, I was like, well, okay, this is the positive that I'm working towards. And every time a positive emotion would come up around that, I would then actually think, okay, how is that formatted? What caused that to happen? What made this shift occur? Can I add more fuel to that fire so that I can shift my perception? What actions can I take, physical actions, to reinforce where I'm wanting to get to?
Right.
And suddenly I found myself reaching out to old clients and things, and in regards to contracts that had either fell by the wayside or that had stagnated for any particular reason, just to say, hey, I'm still here. If you want to speak, we can still pick this up and move forward with it. And the response was instantaneous.
Nice.
again, like we were saying last week, almost instantaneously, you get this response back from the universe going, well done, here you go, here's more of what you're looking for. And it just starts to uplift you just by actually considering how that positivity was formatted initially.
And how amazing. And again, I always like to say this because there will be people listening that are going through something, and that quick turnaround won't be so evident at the beginning because maybe their test level is going to go deeper. So this is
Mhm.
a side note, a PowerPoint to that if you really are working this formula and this transformation, do not let anything move you from that course. You will be tested. And the more it's showing up, let's say, repeating negative, like I applied, but my turnaround was negative, or my clients weren't reaching out, or the ones that did, it didn't go well. Keep moving, keep advancing, keep applying. The universe will continue to test our resolve. If we all had that quick turnaround, right? 24/7, we would take that for granted too. We would just be like, oh, I've got this. And we would think we were these evolved beings and there'd be no necessary work left for us to do, right? We'd all be elevated. However, there always will be a moment, a glance of the universe acknowledging the work well done. The key is to also be aware of it. And it may not be a phone call and a quick turnaround with a client, but maybe if you stayed steady somewhere throughout the day, there would be a message from a client. I would like to set up a time to speak with you next week. And then that teaches another lesson in patience and softness on yourself while you're transforming all of these patterns. So, usually, when you're aligned and you're in this environment, and I mean external and internal, which we are, where we're really working at becoming skilled human beings, actualized human beings, the turnaround will be quicker as it has been for you, which is so amazing for our community to hear that you are applying it weekly. You are seeing the outcome, the positive outcomes weekly. So it's amazing. I love watching it.
Well, thank you. I'm enjoying watching it too because when I sort of started this journey, actually before I came across the science of empowerment, but this has definitely elevated my journey exponentially, just in the way that I'm thinking and behaving and how I react and respond to scenarios external to myself. And I couldn't help but think of there was this teen movie, I'm talking a good probably 15, 20 years ago, um, which apologies to anybody who has seen it and if I'm going to mangle it because I didn't see it, but I remember the premise of the movie was about this girl who would wear white in New York City at the end of winter. And people would say, how can you possibly do that? You're going to get it full of mud and smog and all the rest of it. And she was just saying, I'm just lucky. And the whole movie was about the fact that she just moved through life with effortless grace because she was phenomenally lucky in just everything that happened to her. And then, exactly as you said, if everybody had that, we wouldn't appreciate it,
Right.
right? And she actually loses that ability, and that's when she actually starts to appreciate it and realize that, oh, she actually had something pretty incredible on her side.
And
And
I'm so
yeah.
sorry. I just got a quick thought that kind of just came into me. That is the beauty of this lifetime in physicality with consciousness. We did lose it at the beginning. And the beauty of the journey is the appreciation of what we are discovering throughout this lifetime. And we don't have to lose things in order to gain perspective, even though that's kind of built into the human condition. But I really believe at birth we were slated, we almost were erased. And from little tiny beings up through, again, our experiences. This is the universe, the power of the universe reminding us we are here to remember our greatness, remember our brilliance, remember our connectivity to the universe. So that I think the trials, the tribulations, the challenges, the hardships, the struggles, the difficulties, all of these emotions that we go through, they're just markers, they're universal markers to rise up to that challenge and really fill our being with knowledge, with application, and with the actual experience of knowing how powerful we really are.
And that's actually again brought out, well, several times in your book, around how we are here not to live someone else's preconceived projection onto us, but rather to find our authentic self and really embrace our genius.
Yeah.
And that is so beautiful because, I grew up deeply Christian, and I love that faith and that way of looking at things. But one of the downfalls that I noticed was, and I still think about quite a lot, is because the faith is very much centered around a divine being that we should look to for guidance and inspiration, which is perfectly correct. But because it's built around that, they then also push aside individuality to a
Yeah.
very large extent. And I don't blame the faith. I maybe talk about very specifically certain religions or people within that modality, and that comes from centuries upon centuries of needing to control the human race in one form or another. And so now you get to a point where you want to really express yourself. You want to embrace that genius so that you can give back to society around you. But in my case, at least, I still come up against this mental block of, oh, but you shouldn't do that because you need to be thinking about everybody else, not just yourself. Which is why I thought it was so beautiful that very early in the book, you talk about essentially first filling your cup and having the self-awareness to know when you have reached that point of saturation, that now you are able to give of yourself to the rest of the world without actually impacting your individuality and your genius.
And one of the and like you too, I mean, Christianity at the foundation was such a beautiful energetic gift
Mm,
to civilization. It's the powers that got behind it, right, that distorted its message and its meaning. There's one powerful thought that always comes from Jesus on the cross. And I believe the reason why this message has not been distorted from the powers, because the universal power behind this thought protects this thought to all of us. And it's when he was on the cross and he said, "Forgive them, Father, for they not know what they do." Now think about that. Even if you don't believe in a God or a God or gods, or you don't believe in Jesus, or you believe in the man but not the whatever that is. But let's just take that we all understand that stories that last decades, hundreds and thousands of years have staying power for a reason. That
mm,
saying from that story was there to remind you. And he also said, "Do you not know that you are God's yourself?" And that was why do you think those messages resonate and have stayed? He knew, I have seen the face of God. I have touched upon the power. I am not powerful over you. I am the reflection to remind you of your power. You're just seeing it through me, but you have it too. And I think if we can all look at religion, spirituality, if we stopped judging it and just decided to look at it as a pathway to that part of ourselves we would be so less judgmental upon one another. Because whether I believed in one God or you believed in another, we're all trying to have faith in ourselves through that process.
That is such a beautiful thought. And I think it's one that I'd like to reinforce ever so slightly, because it's so true when Jesus said that, first of all, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. What an incredible display from my perspective of somebody literally who is in agony,
Yeah.
taking the time to recognize that no, the reasons these actions were carried out against me is just because they were uninformed. That's all it is.
That's it. They were
And he could,
ignorant to knowledge, ignorant to
yes,
power. That's it.
exactly, ignorant to the power, and therefore, let's not cast aspersions where there should be none. And that to me is just the most beautiful thing, because I mean, when I was a child reading that passage, I literally sat there and went, oh no, if that was me, I would have called down fire and lightning and brimstone and all the rest of it, because how very dare you. And,
And
you know it,
why would most of us do that? Because we haven't connected to knowing that this is a moment in our evolution. It is not the beginning and the stop of it, right? This is where fear comes in. This is where limiting mindset comes in. This is all I have. Oh my God, give me, give me, give me. He understood this was a pebble in the ripple of the grand universe. It was just a moment of teaching. And that's what it is. But because we're conditioned in this, again, this physicality, all of that sensory that can connect to something, someone outside of the sensories, we're just not skilled in it yet. So we have fear and judgment around it. So our ego would be like fire and brimstone, where he understood the compassion and the empowerment isn't through the ego, it's through the consciousness and the knowing of universal love.
absolutely, absolutely. But then to your point as well about when he said, do you not know that you are also gods?
Yeah.
And that always just resonated so deeply with me throughout life, and through all the esoteric disciplines that I've studied. I've seen that come through over and over again. And one of the things that you bring out in your book, one little sentence, but again, so profound. It says, we have been taught to follow information that keeps us common and lets us give away our genius.
Oh, I love that. Even for me, when I hear that back, and I really, we have to think about that for a moment, because it is such a layered and rooted statement. And if we all could partner with that statement and carry that with us, we would not flow with the disruption ever again. We would know our place matters. We have purpose here, no matter what the condition. We have purpose of teaching, learning, and evolving. And that's what that statement is about. Do not let anyone put you in the arena of commonality. We are very uncommon humans. And I mean uncommon in the true sense.
Yes. I'd like to explore that statement a bit further, even though it goes quite off my notes. But I'm feeling like I really want to go a bit deeper on that, because a lot of my friends who I've had for many, many, many years, oftentimes when they hit a bit of a depression, so I'm not, again, not talking about a clinical depression or anything like that. I'm just talking about, those moments of questioning that we all go through, where you're just feeling low on energy and you're feeling like nothing really seems to matter. And the question that always comes up for them is, there has to be more. There has to be more than just this. And by this, they mean, waking up in the morning, feeding the kids, going to work, coming home, putting dinner on, showering, going to bed. You know, they keep saying like there has got to be more than just this cycle that repeats itself that just ends in death, and then you're forgotten within 2 or 3 generations. You know, no one, we know about our great grandparents, but who amongst us can actually tell each other stories of their lives, right?
Right.
I bring all of that up because this is essentially what I think is so important is I think we hit those moments, and please correct me if I'm wrong, if you believe I'm wrong, or if you have another perspective on this. But I believe that we hit those moments because we've given away our genius, because we've stopped being uncommon and allowed ourselves to be common, which is essentially a slap in the face of our own divinity, of our own power.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is what it is, what you just said so beautifully. We it and I write about this in the book too. It isn't, again, grandparents, um, parents, society, school, or this. We're not here to lay blame on anyone. We all, for
No,
the most part, we all do the very best we can at every given moment in all the situations. But how many of us have grown up with a mother and or a father or a partnership, whatever our family dynamics may look like, where we were taught, where we were raised to be uncommon, where we were given the tools and the skill and the pathway to really become remarkable. Many of us don't because our parents didn't do the work in order to know what that felt like. So they could not teach it to us. So the cycle and the system sets in very easily, very quickly, and we begin to just follow the status quo. And once in a while, some of us will have a glimpse into what is that? Who is that? And maybe it's artistry, maybe it's pop stars, or it's a Nobel Peace Prize winner, or maybe it is a president or a leader of a company that's very unique and has, you know, um, insight into some ideas that maybe for generations no one did. We have moments, okay? We'll use like a Muhammad Ali in the ring, or a Martin Luther King, or a Gandhi, right? And then all of our beautiful teachers, Jesus and Buddha and Allah and all of that kind of stuff. So we have moments where we connect to greatness, where we connect to sparks of awareness to the uncommonality of humans. But it's very fleeting. And I really do believe that our journey here is to rediscover, uncover that exact knowing. We were born into a state of genius. It is that we forgot it. And the journey through to the end in this physical experience is to remember it, and not to remember it in the egoic way so that we leave some grand legacy, though that is important. I believe, and this is just my personal humble opinion, that the awakening in the physicality is for beyond the physicality, to raise the vibration in spirit or conscious, or I'll even say intellectual form, and where that purpose will then be served. I hope that's clear. I know there's a lot there.
that is clear, and it's also there is a lot there. There's a huge amount there. However, by the same token, it's just so nice to hear somebody affirm that every person on this planet has that ability. And like you say, you know, we're not trying to blame anyone or any system or anything like that, because most parents out there want the best for their children. They want more for their children than they had, right? And and I know from personal experience and from experience with my friends as well, for their parents, greatness is very much set on a very specific track,
Yeah.
right? And that can also unfortunately stifle genius from time to time because it might not be the right track for that individual,
Right,
which
because
I
it's
think it,
usually, I'm so sorry, it's usually academic,
Mhm.
education, and money.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's usually what it is. Oh, you're going to go to this varsity or this college, and that's how life is going to be for you. And by the time you're 25, you're going to start having 2.5 kids, and
Yeah.
your life is mapped out for you at a very young age.
Yeah.
If your parents, which generally happens, want the quote unquote best for you,
Yes.
right? But as we keep saying, it's up to us to recognize that whilst that has the best intention behind it,
Right.
it is still a projection.
Yeah.
And it is up to us to decide whether that projection fits with our individuality and where we're wanting to go and the self actualized genius that we want to attain or not.
And how amazing would it be, Stefan, if while we were growing, whether in school, in religious spiritual studies, and in our home environment, we balanced that out. We started to bring in, it is important to educate and maybe have the experience of academic success or even financial success, but not at the takeaway of spirit, consciousness, evolution. And this is why we're so off balance. Can you imagine if we took even just the smallest amount of time that we put in, say, to everything else, into a spiritual practice every day since we were little kids? Oh my God, the children of the future would be, and I'm saying superheroes, not in the comic book sense, in the leadership sense. Can you, again, we've talked about this, but you have a class and we have 10 kids and we take them through an 8-week course young, and we follow them from kindergarten all the way up through high school, and we do a pilot program, or we do it from 5th grade, to 8th grade. But you watch what differentiates those young human beings who also their brain is allowed to move in that direction of genius thinking, of higher potential, of knowing I am capable of thinking and building and creating great things, not just on this structured path. We are teaching go off the path, become an outlier, think outside of that middle lane. It's amazing what can happen. I know this because I apply this with my youngest daughter, and I have worked at this with her. And the interaction with her is very different than, say, my 21-year-old. Now, different personalities, different receptivity abilities. So that has to come
Mhm.
in, but all we just all have it coded in our DNA. We are genius. We are empowered human beings. It's the structure of limitation that buries it. And the science of empowerment and the J3 equals E formula is blowing the structure out. It's just widening it way out here.
Which really brings me to our next point, or the next point that I wanted to talk to you about. Because it's one of the paragraphs that also, it took me a while to wrap my head around it. I had to reread it a few times. But the essence of the thought was that essentially what we want to get to is to no longer be idle in self denial. We would be able to remove the option of placing blame and responsibility and complaint on others or other situations external to ourselves. And then we would be able to respond from a voluntary position of self reflected awareness. Now, the reason why I think that took me a while to wrap my head around is because your book is not written like most sort of self-help books where it's like, oh, if you do this, you will have a life of bliss and an incredible, phenomenal wealth and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
all you're saying is, no, no, what's literally going to happen is you're going to be able to respond from a place of empowerment. So we're not saying that these problems go away, but you're not going to be living in a state of restrictive conditioning anymore. And that, I think, is all the difference.
That is the key that unlocks it. This is what empowers you. We're not living in delusion. We are in the human condition. We are connected to the negative and positive and the in between of this existence. There is no way out. There is a way through. And the journey, the process, and the experience of going through the human experience is that knowing. There is a way to recalibrate it to such a frequency that the drama, the chaos, the challenges do not weight you down. They do not disrupt you in a harmful, hurtful, negative way. You become very adept in your own flow. So it almost is like a soft breeze. It comes in, you feel it, and it moves on. It doesn't hold you into structure. It allows you to expand the structure. Almost it reverberates. So there's fluidity. So intellectually and emotionally, you understand, yes, there will be challenges, but the way I will move through them is of beauty, of power, and of genius.
Oh, I love that because, we've spoken about how times have changed and how there are seemingly more challenges coming at each and every one of us on a day-to-day basis. And that to me is why this is so important to have that ability. Because then to top it all off, you know, and everybody, well, not everybody, but I think most people know that the body mind connection is very much present because doctors will tell us that the leading cause of cancer, heart disease, etc., is stress, right? And stress is very much a mental thing. So if you're able to release that stress, not by suppressing it, because the only way out is through, like you said, right? But instead of being able to move through it with that grace, with that power, you're now able to release that stress, all the things that the world, society throws and puts on us. You're able to release that and move forward constantly, energetically, to a place of empowerment.
Absolutely. I have a saying on my board in front of me that says, move on rather than hold on. And if you really think about that, it's not that there's not an imprint or a residue of a challenge, of an experience. And we all understand the joys of happiness and the depths of sorrow, again, and everywhere in between. And this is what I love about this education system in the science of empowerment. It's real. It acknowledges that we are always going to have a threading to emotion, to ego, and to consciousness. The more we can educate, the more we can view our own observance into our own self evolution is really what transforms this experience. It lends itself to bringing in the knowing as we and bringing this kind of back to what we were talking about before. We are not saying we are gods as ego. We are saying we are connected to the expansion of the potential to become that empowered. If we lived to be 500 years old and that was our lifetime, we would become gods ourselves. We would study and read and evolve because we would have the longevity of evolution. Most of us, if we're lucky, right, we're within 100-year span, and some of us get cut much short. There's a lot going on in a very short time. And what I'm trying to give hope and inspire our community is to say, yes, on one level, it's a short span of time. But if you could tap into the power source of your genius, what you could accomplish in 7, 8, 9, 10 decades, we've got this. Don't waste your time anymore in the structure of stagnation. Don't stay in the holding pattern of restriction. Allow yourself to believe in that genius state of who you are and really move within that current of genius, because then everything becomes a possibility. Everything becomes an awareness. And you no longer look at something and then run down the list. Well, I could never do that. I'm not smart enough. I'm not rich enough. I'm not educated. Of course you are. And where you aren't, read on it, study on it, apply it, and you will start to become that.
For sure, for sure. As we start to wrap up over the next 10 minutes or so, first of all, I'd like to just say to our audience, if you have any questions for Laura and myself on today's episode, please feel free to post a comment, and we'll try and respond in real time, or otherwise we'll catch up on the replays and that sort of thing as well. But one of the things that you mentioned in your book, Laura, I think it's at the end of chapter 11, it's just this one sentence, 3 words, but it sums up so much. And it says, mindfulness is power.
Yeah.
And it's so true what you're saying. If we had that longevity, right, we would evolve and we would grow so much to the point where we were so deeply mindful of who we are and where we are that we would essentially become gods. And again, not gods from an egotistical point of view, but more just from the perspective of being in full flow with divinity, as well as recognizing our ability to shape and mold our reality for ourselves. And when I read that, I just went, this is so.
Whoops. I don't know if you could hear me, Stefan. You froze. So I'm going to give you a moment to see if you can reconnect. Okay. So, yes, I'm going to finish that quick thought for you, that we really have this ability to tap into this amazing aspect of our underdeveloped potential. And when we think these thoughts of knowing that we have pathway to empowerment,
Oh,
this is where
apologies.
we go. Yes, you
Yeah,
did cut out for a moment, so I just tried to pick up from the half point of your sentence, but that's okay.
thank you.
Why don't you finish?
No, I was just, I've actually lost my train of thought. Apologies.
That's okay. So we were talking about really, and I was trying to finish the thought of, when we talk about tapping into that godlike energy, it isn't in the way that our mind has been trained. I'm trying to say that the power and the beauty and the grace and the dignity of knowing that this human experience was set forth for each one of us to know that we are not separate from any other living entity. We are an aspect, a reflection, an observance of others. Some of us are just more connected to the depth of information and the depth of knowledge. And that is for us to be inspired and motivated to grow and to learn. It's not a separation that someone is better than us. It is the opportunity. So if we look at someone that we admire or we believe in a spirituality, that is the indicator, the marker for us to achieve that experience and elevate. It isn't for us to judge or feel that we are somehow not gifted ourselves. We are meant for greatness. We are meant to experience the beauty and the power of what genius states of mind and being feel like. And I want everyone to really know that.
Well, Laura, this has been, again, I think I say every single time, this is one of the best discussions we've had. But seriously, this was
Yes.
really powerful today.
Yeah.
Um, I think mainly because now we're getting to the crux of what evolution would actually look like for the individual. And we're looking at the human condition and going, there is more out there, and it's not complicated to access it.
No.
It might not be easy because you are going to come up against decades of programming, but it's not complicated by any stretch of the imagination because literally a child can and does learn this.
Yes, and remember that anyone that is trying to put the message forth that it is complicated, it is not for you. Stay status quo, stay common, do as you're told, fit into that box, all of well, all these labels and terminologies. I want you to take that as the indicator. Oh, I am to go up it, around it, under it, through it. I will find my way around that limiting belief. That is outside of me. It is not inside of me. So take those markers as a rite of passage. That is you reflecting back to yourself. This is my time to discover my genius.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. Laura, a pleasure as always.
Thank you.
I'm definitely looking forward to our discussion next week, same
Me
time,
too.
same place.
Me too.
If anybody has any questions or comments, please do reach out to Laura or myself. Happy to assist. Please remember that for every purchase of the Science of Empowerment book, link in the bio, you will be able to gain a free 30-minute life coaching session with Laura to help you put into practice some of the principles that we've actually been discussing over the course of the last, gosh, is it 5 weeks now? I think it's 4 or 5 weeks.
It's going by so fast.
I know it's time is just, it feels like it's, you blink and the year's over. Well, actually, it literally does feel like that sometimes.
Yeah.
Other than that, to our audience, whether you're catching this live or the replay, please do make sure to like also and subscribe, whether you're on Laura's channel or on the Wellness Lifestyle Conference, just so that you can stay up to date with the latest information and videos as we release them. Priscilla says, thank you for an enlightening discussion. Thank you, Priscilla, for joining us. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that is it from our side. Have an empowered week and hope you feel better soon, Laura.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Stay positive.
Bye bye.